Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer. It's my first episode in 2 days. I did an episode a couple of days ago, so this is a rarity for me to do so many episodes in such a short amount of time. But I have a very special guest who is now running for Congress. But his name is Mayor Joseph Signorello. Did I get that correct?
You did. How's it going, Evan? Nice to
Very
see you.
nice to have you here.
Thrilled to be here.
And you were running for Congress in New Jersey's 7th Congressional District.
Yeah, so I'm excited about it. I'm the current mayor of Roselle Park. I grew up in CD7. Lines get redrawn, so Roselle Park's a little bit out of CD7, but historically that's my district. So that's the district we're running in, and we're ready to try and flip it blue.
Absolutely, I hear that. And so I'm going to get right into it because the 7th Congressional District is a very diverse district in many aspects, politically speaking as well. Before you were running for the United States Senate to try to primary Bob Menendez, why did you decide to run for Congress instead?
Well, I would say at the end of the day, it's really hard to, from a policy perspective, differentiate myself from Senator Menendez, right? Do I think Senator Menendez has his public perception issues? Yes. Do I think that there are some issues that are going to need to be addressed in his campaign? Yes. But as I was calling supporters, donors, voters, the very simple fact is, especially on things like foreign policy, him and I are very much aligned. It's really hard to just say, hey, let's talk about some, new Senate candidate when you're just aligned on policy, right? And I think very, very directly, his tenure and seniority in the Senate is very important when it comes to foreign policy and my views on foreign policy. And that's something that at the end of the day, I don't want to put in jeopardy for the Democratic Party, right? I'm a strong supporter of Ukraine, strong supporter of Israel. I probably lean, I would say, more center to center right than most Democrats when it comes to foreign policy. And I think that's something that I very much share with Senator Menendez. So it's really hard to attack a guy who you agree with on a lot of fronts.
Well, that's a very good answer, and I have to say that I I wasn't sure. I thought it was going to be a tough decision for a lot of voters because there's a lot of people who have some Menendez fatigue, but at the same time, as you said, the seniority really helps out New Jersey. And I know that that in your run for the Senate, you were endorsed by the Ford Party, and there's that ranked choice voting issue. And I think that it would have been great if we could have had ranked choice voting a couple of years ago, especially in the primaries elections for presidential. But how do you feel about ranked choice voting? I'm curious about that.
Well, I still am a fan of ranked choice voting, right? I think ultimately, as much as I'm a Democrat, I think it's healthy to have third and fourth parties, right? But with ranked choice voting, nobody has to worry about being a spoiler candidate, right? That fear goes away. Look, I've lived and worked in, and this is something that I have as a I really pride myself over in the Democratic Party because a lot of the left wing in the Democratic Party loves to talk about how things work in Europe and the social safety net in Europe. I've actually lived and worked in Europe. And I think part of why they have a healthy democracy in a lot of ways is there's a lot of, opportunities to, the Republican Party is a big conglomeration of center left or center right, and far right folks. And the Democratic Party is an even bigger tent, right? There's moderate Democrats, there's extreme left-wing Democrats, there's Bernie-crats who, are a little bit more independent but still aligned with the Democratic Party. I think you could break those up into smaller parties. And I think, especially selfishly as a Democrat, in places where Democrats have struggled to win, I actually think that that's the model forward, right? If you look at a place like Missouri, which seems to have gotten away from us as a party, you could have a thing like ranked choice voting there, where maybe folks aren't comfortable voting for a Democrat, but maybe they are comfortable voting for a forward party candidate or a Green Party candidate, right? Like, I used to live in Germany, and it's amazing what the Green Party has done there. And actually, you think Green Party in America, you think liberal left wing, but the Green Party has really spoken to farmers and conservatives in Germany. And I think that that's something that if you have a healthy ranked choice voting system, like countrywide in America, that gives folks a chance to vote without being tied to purely Democrat, Republican. And I think that's especially important, just to put an end cap on it, where I don't think the Republican Party functions like a normal party anymore, sadly, right? And it gives them another option outside of the Republican Party.
I agree with you. I think ranked choice voting, especially in primaries and in generals, allows people to express the nuances of their opinions rather than choose one or the other. Which, I see arguments in favor of both, but I think that it's really interesting that Alaska has a Democratic congresswoman thanks to ranked choice voting, but they also have a very moderate Republican senator. So it doesn't necessarily just benefit one party or the other. If anything, it benefits sanity.
Yeah, I agree. And I think at the end of the day, and we're diving right into it. Look, there's things that I'm on a Blue Dog podcast, and I think my policies as a mayor have represented that and will continue to represent that as a candidate. But personally, there are some things that I veer left on. There are some things that I veer right on. I do fundamentally think, though, in a country of 330 million people, right, with 50 different states, I think the march towards the left or the march towards the right needs to be done in a tactical and slower pace, so people feel comfortable with that change versus radical changes. And as much as there's certain things that I'd love to see radical changes on, people are used to the way we have our Medicare system or social safety net, right? People are used to our foreign policy. So making change, steering that ship is something that consistently needs to be done in a gradual way versus upending the entire system.
Well, I agree with you 100%. In fact, I wrote something in a letter to the editor where I said, imagine if you went to bed tonight and you didn't wake up until 2055. Wouldn't you be scared to see all the changes that had occurred since you were last conscious? And I think what you're saying speaks to that idea that, everything, it's human nature to adapt, but we expect incrementalism.
Yeah, and I think that cuts both ways, right? I mean, that cuts from, we need to learn that as a Democratic Party, but the right needs to learn that too. And I think they're getting their butts kicked in ways where they weren't supposed to with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, right? Like, there are states that are consistently red that rejected via referendum more stringent controls on a woman's right to choose. And I think upending the system, again, whether it's right or left, overnight is problematic for a lot of voters, right? For Roe v. Wade has been the standard for decades, and just upending that overnight is problematic.
Yes, absolutely. Especially since there are a lot of people who were benefiting from Roe who weren't even alive when Roe was was ruled in 1973. And I think that during the debate in 2016, Tim Kaine said that when he and Vice President Pence were arguing over abortion. So when you take something away that, like overnight, that had been precedent or rule of law for over 50 years, there's going to be some backlash, regardless of who's in charge of the court. So I totally. Yep. So New Jersey's 7th Congressional District, there's a bit of a primary right now. There are two candidates, you and someone else. How are you different from your primary candidate?
Well, I've won some elections before. Look, I on a personal level, I have a lot of respect for anybody who gets in the field, right? Especially, I think the Working Families Party, or it's the Alliance in New Jersey, is an important voice in New Jersey. I think Sue's advocacy on a lot of issues has been important. I just think we need somebody who's won a race before, right? I mean, Roselle Park, just for those of you who don't know, was this little red dot in the middle of a very blue Union County that we flipped from red to blue and is held strong there. I ran Senator Bramnick is every Democrat's favorite Republican, and we ran a very spirited race in LD21, which is about a third of CD7. And that was a winnable district. I have to say, we had polling up until the last minute that showed, Phil Murphy winning by 9 points and us winning by 2 to 3 points, right? And I think the big draw that I've had to Congressional District 7 is folks, particularly in Westfield, which we're going to need to win, and Summit, which I did win in 2021. They're going to need to turn out. And these were the first folks that said, Joe, look, stop fighting against other Democrats. Tom Kean is beatable, and we remember you from the LP21 and the race that you ran. Springfield, Summit are still in LP21, and those are both Democrat bastions we're going to need to flip. Those are places that know me very well, and I won when I ran for state senate. I think we need to build on the successes we had with the state senate race. And I think candidly, look, the CD7 is an R+1 district, right? This is a on paper purple with a lean red district. I think it's going to take somebody with a pretty moderate track record as mayor to win this. I as much as I love and respect the liberal wing of the party, this is in the district for the liberal wing of the party.
I agree with you. And I want to talk about, before we get into Congressman Kean, I want to talk a little bit about what did you do as mayor, but first, how did you get in? Because as you stated, it was a very Republican area or town at one time. How did you resonate with the electorate as a Democrat in a red town?
I think it boils down to there's no Republican or Democrat pothole, right? And I know I'm talking about mayor stuff right now, but that scales up to the federal level too, right? We started promising Roselle Park, and what hadn't happened before was getting the basics right. Now, we're still not perfect, but we're a lot better than we were. And I always love this quote. My favorite libertarian friend told me, he goes, I'll sign up for socialized Medicare or socialized medicine when the United States Postal Service runs perfectly. And I think that really makes sense. Is we told people we were going to get the basics of government right, and the rest will follow. And people bought into that view then, and they're continuing to buy into that view now. Because on a local level, what do people care about? Taxes staying low, which we've kept them low. Potholes getting fixed, roads getting paved, services up to speed, and we've done all that. And that's we came in with that pitch saying we're going to get the basics right again, and we've continued to get those basics right and build on that. And that's how we flipped it, and that's how we continued to keep it a blue town.
That's interesting. And how long have you been the mayor there for?
So this is my second term. I just got reelected. This is my 5th year. So it's it's a grind some days, but I love it.
So the people are feeling the changes and they trusted you with the second term.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, look, we've also had a demographic shift, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the town has trended more blue. But we've had the other thing that Roselle Park faced, we actually had a pretty liberal Republican party here locally, right? So, we've had LGBTQ Republican candidates here that has had cross-party appeal. They've been pretty forward-thinking when it comes to things like green energy and a lot of the social services. So, it was also harder to differentiate as a Democrat when Republicans are speaking some of our language. But yeah, they bought into what we're selling, and we're continuing to live up to that mantra of trying to get the basics right and building off that.
Well, that's what you hope for with any party, that they match the candidate and the party with the area. You got to know your audience, is what I say. I mean, that's why New Jersey's had a lot of moderate Republican governors that oftentimes get reelected, while Democrats by and large don't, except for our current governor who broke the losing streak for Democrats by winning a second term in 2021. And I want to get into that because Congressman Kean is the son of former Governor Tom Kean, Sr., who is I believe he's one of our most, if not our most popular governor in recent history. And so when people hear Tom Kean, they think good things, but how where do you differ from Tom Kaine Jr. on, who's going to be your opponent if you win the primary?
So I want to give I have respect for Tom Kaine Jr. as an individual, and I think it's important to start off on a place of respect. He's a good person with a good heart. I do not agree with a lot of his views. And he was my state senator when I first got elected, and he's one of the first person to reach out to me and have a coffee with me. I think the problem lies with Congressman Kaine is, look, when you grow up being the son of a governor, and when you grow up, sort of, I would say, I don't want to say with a silver spoon in your mouth, but, kind of being bred and groomed to be the next thing in politics. I think as much as you try, it's very hard to relate to the average New Jerseyan. And I think it's very hard to relate to the average person in CD7, right? So I grew up in a lower middle class family in CD7, worked my way through college, worked my way to where I am. I think, Congressman Kaine started out with a set of advantages and name recognition that most of us don't start off with in life. And I think that's a real disconnect, Republican, Democrat, whatever. I think when you start off with that, it's very hard to understand the average person's struggle in the state of New Jersey. And I think that's something that Congressman Kaine struggles with. The other thing is, and I think this cuts across, I have this criticism for Democrats and Republicans. The congressperson of CD7, although it may be a Democrat or a Republican, needs to be not afraid to buck their own party. And I do not see that from Congressman Kaine, right? I see him towing the party line. When it came to the debt ceiling deal, I think that he should have been on the side of sanity earlier. When it comes to social issues, I think during his race against Tom Malinowski, he talked a good game, but the proof is in the pudding. At the end of the day, he aligns with the Republican Party. Look, I'm a Democrat who has called out Phil Murphy when it makes sense. I'm a Democrat who's called out my own party very often when it makes sense. And I think whether you're a Democrat or a Republican in a purple district like CD7, you need to be the representative that's going to call out your own party when it's nonsense. And I don't see that level of pushback from Congressman Kaine. And I think that's going to be key to this election and key to representing CD7 in perpetuity.
Well, Congressman Kaine, from what I heard, was a pretty good state senator. However, one of my problems with how he ran his race, and he's not the only one to do it, but basically, I remember in 2022, which is only last year, during the primary, he basically ran on having Trump's back, and then he tried to distance himself from Trump during the general. And to me, that screams opportunism a little bit. And actually, I was watching an interview with my mother with Tom Kaine on the television. I think it was on News 12 New Jersey, and my mom said he sounds a lot like his father in terms of the policy. And I said to her, if only he had run his campaign both in the primary and the general like that, I think I'd have more respect for him.
It's consistency, right? I mean, and I would say, it is there's Republicans in New Jersey, right? Like, and there's a strong Republican Party in New Jersey, but they're not Trump Republicans on the whole, right? Especially in northern New Jersey. I think you get more with respect to South Jersey. I think the South Jersey R's are a little bit more, the Trump wing. I think North Jersey, look, the CD7 is a perfect example of this, right? So let me give you a couple facts about CD7. It is part of the Biden 18. So it is a place that Biden won. So that means that you have Republicans voting for Biden who couldn't stand Trump. But it's also a place, Phil Murphy lost CD7 by 12 points. Like, I want to reiterate that. Jack Ciattarelli beat Phil Murphy in CD7 by 12 points. So, I think there's a strong independent streak when it comes to CD7. I think it's socially liberal but fiscally conservative, and I think you need to be consistent on all of these things. And look, it's probably with respect to the Republicans, I don't. I don't agree with what they do, but it's hard to, when Trump is still polling, 40% leading the pack for the presidential nomination. They're obviously going to kowtow to Trump, but look, I hate Chris Christie in a lot of ways for the things that he did to this state. But at least he's got the fortitude to stand up to his party. I just don't see that from Congressman Kane in a very real way. You know, he switches sides depending on what's convenient for him at the time.
Well, Ana Navarro said this about President Trump, and sometimes I feel the same way about Congressman Kane. He holds a position for less time than you may hold a yoga position. So I totally get what you're saying, and I agree with you. And that's why this is so frustrating, because President Trump is the first president to lose re-election since George H.W. Bush, who was president before I was born. I was born during the Clinton years. So I don't understand what the Republican Party is doing. You'd think that they would distance themselves from the first president to lose re-election in nearly 30 years, and they haven't done that. So that it's really weird to me.
This is a mess of their own creation,
Right.
right? I think a large part of their base has been fanatical for many years, right? And I think this is a manifestation of that. And I think Donald Trump, people want to, you know, act like he's the root of the evils. I think he's the manifestation of a lot of what they've sown over the last 20 to 30 years. So I think it's hard for them to, you know, just at the end of the day, these evangelicals, as an example, who really support Trump, that's a large part of their overarching base. They can't win elections without it. So it's tough without an actual party splinter. I think it's going to be a fever that's going to take a long time to sweat out for the Republican Party.
Probably. And it actually seems it's interesting because President Trump, I don't remember what I was going to say, but I think that when Trump basically he was like the answer to the Tea Party prayers almost, because before people were questioning whether Obama was a citizen, in large part thanks to Trump, but also people were thankful that were happy that that congressman from South Carolina heckled Obama, and so there was always that base that hated what the liberals and the Democrats stood for, but they didn't have a real leader until Trump came along. He was the answer to their prayers.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. So.
Are there any issues that you agree with Congressman Kane on? And I'm sure that there may be some issues, but I have a feeling that you will be better equipped to deal with those issues than Kane has dealt with them. So I'd like to hear about that.
Well, look, I would say there's probably two major things, or maybe three major things, that I think any congressman in New Jersey should support, and I think that we're pretty well aligned on that, right? So I think getting restoring the SALT tax break, I think, is important. Very candidly, as a mayor in New Jersey, I also wish that we didn't hit the SALT tax rate so quickly, right? I do wish that we were better about controlling property taxes in the state of New Jersey. I think that would be better for our local economy, better for voters here, better for, I think the fiscal health of our nation and our state, right? But I do think that as a temporary means, I think we need to fix that SALT tax reduction. I think in large part, broadly, the congressional delegation from New Jersey has been very supportive of bringing back infrastructure funding. We need to make sure that we get back what we give to the federal government. And I'm very, very happy to see funding for the Gateway project come to fruition. I think broadly, the entire delegation from New Jersey has been supportive of that. Maybe Chris Smith or Jeff Van Roo are anti it, but I think broadly they've been supportive of it. And I would say also, I think when it comes to the macro level of New Jersey getting its fair share from the federal government, federal resources, I think that's something that Congressman Kane and I definitely agree on. I mean, I can't stress enough what an economic powerhouse New Jersey is, and we shouldn't have to beg for our fair share. Something that I actually, when I think about winning this election, I think about folks like Max Rose and Josh Gottheimer. I think that's the pathway to win CD7. And Josh Gottheimer is really strong on this, is taking it back and making sure that we get our fair share. I think that's something that Congressman Kane is attuned to. So there's overlaps there. There's certainly overlaps.
Well, I'm a big fan of Max Rose and Gottheimer. In fact, I was a field organizer for Max Rose, so I was very last year, of course, and I was very disappointed that he did not win. But Staten Island is a different it's a different district than NJ7. Even though it votes for Democrats and Republicans, it's very different in a lot of aspects. But I agree with you that they have done well when they were in Congress, or Josh Gottheimer is currently in Congress, and I know he's been outspoken about what New York's doing with congestion pricing. So
Yeah, I actually differ with Congressman Gottheimer on that. I know, look, he's doing his best for his constituents, right? I think his constituents are much more impacted than my constituents are or would be, right? Literally being a bridge across from New York. I actually think I don't hate congestion pricing in a vacuum. I think more broadly, people need, look, if you're gonna, the idea behind congestion pricing is to get people not using their cars to New York, right? The problem is I don't think New Jersey Transit or the MTA are up to snuff that people have good options outside of cars right now. So I think we deserve a better seat at the table. I mean, look, we've talked about things like getting subway access from New York to New Jersey. Like the 7 line should come to New Jersey. And I think New York should have done a better job of saying, hey, we're going to implement congestion pricing, but this is going to go towards funding the 7 line to New Jersey, or, you know, funding better bus service to New Jersey. I think that's the missing piece of it. But congestion pricing in and of itself, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing.
Right. What do you think will be the biggest issue in 2024 that will decide which way the House goes?
Uh, Women's rights. Yeah, I think, and this is where I think conservatives have lost the thread. I grew up in a Republican household, but I never really understood the Republican Party because in a vacuum, when I hear what Republicans are supposed to stand for, it's individual liberty and, you know, keep your hands off my wallet and all of these things. What I don't get is, in general, I feel like, and I'm not talking about the Republican voters because I think they pick an issue and they stick to it, but I conceptually can understand the mind of a libertarian. Stay away from me entirely. Right? Like protect the borders. I don't want your taxes and give me my individual liberties. I just don't fundamentally understand how the government of the party of small government wants to have such an invasive say in how people live their lives. And I think women are really motivated. I think the men that support them are really motivated. I think that's going to be a driving factor. I also think when it's all said and done, I just don't see. I struggle with Biden's popularity in comparison with how strong the economy is recovering and how resilient the economy tends to be. Now, I hope Biden's popularity is not a factor because I do hope Joe Biden gets reelected. But we're looking at what's potentially a soft landing here from a very high inflationary period. Our inflation is coming down much, much faster in comparison with the rest of the world. And I think we're going to be in a really strong economic position in 2024. I think we have unemployment dipping for folks that have been negatively affected for years across the board. And I have my very, very Republican uncle who's a plumber who says, you know what, Joe? I used to be a Trump supporter. I got to tell you, I'm working right now. I've got so much to do. I've got business coming in. He goes, I'm voting Biden. I don't care how many times he flubs on something. I don't care how many times he trips over something. I'm working, and something that these guys are doing is working. And I think that's going to win the day. I think social issues, I think Democrats are on the right side of individual liberties, especially a woman's right to do her body, what she wants to do. And I think the economic indicators are going to be there in 2024. I really do.
Well, all signs point to that. I will say that I think there are some people, and I'm not one of them, who are apprehensive about the idea of having a president over 80. I'm not one of them. I believe that age, if anything, it's more experience. But my biggest concern is keeping Trump out of the White House. So I just want the best person. I think that Biden doesn't get enough credit for the things that he has done because, unfortunately, it seems like something is every time he accomplishes something, there's a new problem, not because of his leadership, just he's had everything thrown at him and he's handled it fairly well. So I see where you're coming from, and I really love that story about your uncle, and tell your uncle that that it's really appreciated by me.
I will
um,
do.
New Jersey's 7th district is a swing district and maybe a little more right of center, as you stated. What would your message be to independents or Republicans who might be inclined to vote for a Democrat because of these social issues or just anything in general?
Yeah. So I would say specifically with me as a candidate, I think you want somebody who understands when the rubber hits the road at a local level, right? I think you want somebody who there's a lot of federal policies that come down, and it all comes down to rolling down to how it impacts your local taxes and your local municipality's ability to function, right? And I think you want that ability of somebody who is fresh off being a mayor to bring that sort of local know-how to Washington, D.C., right? Because some things make sense in the D.C. vacuum. And then when you look at them as mayor, you're like, oh my God, how are we supposed to, spend this American Rescue Plan money? Or how is this new regulation going to really affect how we're doing things in Roselle Park? I think people will gravitate towards that message. I would say broadly, I want to be the Democrat that I just fundamentally think that I'm the Democrat that people are going to be able to get behind in CD7, because I think CD7 is very much I'm going to oversimplify and say of libertarian views, right? I would even say a lot of the Democrats there are sort of I don't want to say corporate Democrats because sometimes that has a negative connotation, but it's Democrats who are a little bit more pragmatic and sensible when it comes to spending, but left on social issues. I think even the Republicans are left on social issues, but lean right when it comes to taxes and spending. That's the kind of Democrat I am. So, when you're voting for, I hope, a Democrat, Joe Signorello, as a congressional candidate, what you're voting for is somebody who's going to be with you on the social issues every time, but is going to take a realistic approach when it comes to domestic issues, right? And how to implement those domestic issues and how to make healthcare better, how to make our infrastructure better, how to make sure that unemployment stays low. It's going to be it's going to be coming from a Democratic view, but it's going to be coming from a place where I've worked in the private sector and I know that private sector impact. I've worked in a small municipality. I know that small municipality impact. So I hope that I'm the Democrat that Republicans aren't afraid to vote for.
Well, I hope a lot of Republicans do vote for you. If you were the congressman for NJ's 7th district right now, what would your top priority be at this time?
The top priority right now would be the tax situation, right? I think fundamentally, as much as I'd love to just wave a magic wand and lower property tax rates, that's not happening tomorrow. I think we need relief from a tax perspective immediately. I would say the second thing is, I hate to keep harping on infrastructure, but when we talk about infrastructure, we talk about planes, trains, and automobiles. I also want to talk about infrastructure for resilience. We have a lot of places in NJ7 that are adversely affected, and I see this as mayor being, right by NJ7 and historically in NJ7. We get flooded like we've never gotten before, right? I hate to say this, and maybe it makes me sound left wing, but climate change is real and it's here, right? And what we're seeing as an impact from climate change is, abnormally dry periods. And then when we get rain, we get deluges that really strain our infrastructure. And on top of that, because cost of living is so high here and there's such a need for housing, municipalities keep building housing. We need the bare bones infrastructure from sewers, from electricity, to all the basic stuff that we take for granted. I want the shiny new toys. I want the shiny new trains, but I also want our system to be resilient for years and years to come. And it's something that folks really, really don't talk about. And the last thing is education funding, right? So I truly believe, and this is when you take the partisanship out of it, we have our best military leaders talking about the importance of things like universal pre-K, right? Now, New Jersey's done a great job of helping fund things like universal pre-K and bringing free or cost-reduced pre-K to the masses. Pre-K is expensive nowadays, it's expensive for kids, for families to get started and have their kids get the right start. I want to see more federal funding come to New Jersey to make sure that we're properly funding our schools. And oh, by the way, that has a knock-on effect on property taxes, right? Because all of your property taxes, about half of that on your bill, if not more in a lot of towns, comes down to local funding for schools. And that's something that the federal government should be, I think, supporting the state more, and the state should be trickling that down to the municipalities.
All right. Well, it sounds like you've got a lot of good ideas, and universal pre-K is a big issue. It makes a huge impact on how a child what kind of adult a child will develop into.
Yeah, and this is not, I want to be clear here, right? Because I'm talking on a Blue Dog podcast, right? This is not, the Republicans love to talk about, the wokeness or the control of schools from some Democrat liberal elites. Oh, excuse me, I'm getting a phone call. Let me just ignore this. Sorry, the working on an iMac. The biggest federal takeover of our school system happened under George W. Bush. Right? Like, this was a Republican policy and Republican effort, right? So I want to make sure New Jersey does its thing when it comes to education, and New Jersey has its home rule. I just want to see the feds helping foot the bill for it.
Absolutely. We only have a minute left because I did not pay for the upgraded Zoom. So I just have to ask, who are some of your political role models?
JFK. I really like locally nowadays, I like Brian Schatz a lot out of Hawaii. I think Pete Buttigieg is probably my newest, I would say, look, I think he's taken some dings from the right wing, but I love his ability to talk across the aisle, and I hope I can do the same thing.
I hope you can too. It was very great. It was wonderful to have you on. Is there anything else you want to tell my listeners? Any Facebook pages or any Twitter pages that they can go to learn more about your run?
Signorello for NJ on all the socials. We've got the launch. We got the site coming up the second week in July. I don't know when this is coming, so keep an eye out for it. And if you like what you hear, I hope you click and donate.
All right, and you have my support. Thank you very much.
Good talking to you.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.